Hello.
Hi.
Stefan. Thank you for joining me today. Let me take the banner. Oh. I can't believe it. I had a quick spike on my network just as we went live. I hope that won't persist through the show. Hello, Stefan. Did I go robot? We're working, right? Yes, we're working. Cool. Yes. All right. Stefan, hello. So you had a great article on GenAI to spark the sort of start of the topic for today. And I figured that would be a great conversation today for our audience. But how are you really using it? There seems to be a lot of confusion about what's going on with ChatGPT and all of the RAG really decorated or integrated AI models. There's a lot of money being invested, a lot of capital being invested into trying to make the best of it. And it is somewhat reminiscent of crypto and the dot-com bubble. How do you feel about everything before we go into detail?
Oh, I feel good. A little bit sad, but because as I wrote an article, coding will go away, and I'm a coder by heart, and so I'm feeling a bit sad. But overall, I feel good. And you mentioned at one point I want to make in the beginning, because you mentioned the dot-com bubble. Sometimes people confuse the dot-com bubble, and I've been part of it. One of my startup crashed in the dot-com bubble. I think what people confuse is the internet and the dot-com bubble. So the dot-com bubble was over-investment in companies that had no business model or something like that. And then the VC money stopped flowing, and then not only the companies without a business model, but everyone closed shop. The internet had no impact on the internet.
Yeah.
So a lot of people confuse this. I think they think the dot-com bubble had some influence on the internet in some way.
Yeah, the dot-com bubble was basically like an overinflation in hype on the public markets, so on the stock market. So they were either meaningless companies, umbrella like strawman companies, or just way too traditional companies that tacked on like some digital products
Yeah.
or just software of some kind to their offering or just to their logo, and they got a higher valuation on their IPO essentially from that, and they didn't get any cash flow from that, and then it created a stock market where the stocks were worth a lot of money, but it didn't have any backing liquidity. You couldn't actually cash out on everything that's on the market, which is why the crash happened.
Yeah.
And it's oversimplified. It's oversimplified, but that's kind of the idea.
But the internet keep going. There was no impact on the internet. So the internet as a technology just keep growing. More people got internet, more people got emails, more people got websites, more blogs were started. So the internet was growing. That's just in the beginning. So when some people, and that's something I made in the article as a remark, that sometimes people think, oh, the internet bubble, .com bubble, and the AI bubble. So even if the AI bubble should burst, I think the investment bubble might burst, but I don't think the technology bubble will burst, just as the internet bubble didn't.
Well, the AI bubble is interesting because the AI bubble is being propped up by spending between just a handful of companies, right? So the AI market is not liquid between consumers, between customers.
Yeah.
Most of the capital in the AI market is essentially between the top tech companies and Nvidia. That seems to be where most of the capital is. Rotate.
But back then, when I was during the internet bubble times, .com bubble, like there was this internet startups and Sun. Everyone bought Sun.
Fair. Sun and AT&T and
And then some days after that, Sun crashed, and so. It's like in the gold digging times.
It was Oracle and Cisco and Nokia initially, as well as big players.
Yeah, but I think So that's Nvidia. Nvidia is perhaps the son of the 2024.
Colin has a great comment. Colin says internet usage was growing exponentially since 91, basically because of the web and the first graphic browsers, and that growth attracted the overinvestment Stefan was talking about. Hey, Calvin, great to see you. What prompted you to write the article, Stefan?
Oh, I had the article in my pipeline for a long time, and then someone said, ask a question or made a comment, and then I thought, okay, now let's push the article, because I think it's everyone has an opinion, so I have an opinion too, and then if everyone puts out their opinion, I should put out my opinion too. But I also wanted to, because in the discussions I think what's different in the article, or what I try to do in the article, is not a blanket. I mean, there is a clickbait title, but behind that, the idea is to have some milestones how GenAI encoding could look like in 5, 10, 20, 50 years, something. So to a little bit try to structure the future.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So what comes to my mind is the most recent article on Gen AI usage Gartner had a report, and most notably Gergely Oros, the pragmatic engineer author, he made a great I think case study is a good name for it, of just analyzing, surveying engineering organizations and executives, like how they're using executives in tech, how they're using LLMs for the most part, on that can be either Copilot or equivalent ChatGPT. I mean, ChatGPT was the big winner, and Stack Overflow just did a recent survey. Developer survey. And it's surprising. It's very surprising, because if you look at social media, how is ChatGPT being used? Social media gives you this sort of FOMO response of, oh, you shouldn't do X manually anymore because AI can do that for you. And there seems to be like an endless list of what people advise you shouldn't do manually anymore because AI can do it for you. But the difference is in like how many times do I need to check whether the AI did it correctly?
Yes.
To actually be satisfied with it, and is that actually less time spent than me doing it manually?
Yes.
So I see a lot of engineers who are coding with Copilot, and they say, "Oh yeah, it produces an answer really quickly," but it took me 30 minutes of reprompting to get the right result from it. It might have taken me 15 minutes to write it myself, but maybe the experience was just trading off. I had to carry different trade-offs. How are you? Go for it. Yeah.
Okay. No, to your point. I mean, when I went on the internet, I had a 28K modem or a 36, 56 perhaps. US
56,
robotics,
yeah.
probably.
Yeah,
56
56.
US robotics, and then switched to
I had the same
ISDN.
one. Yeah.
And everything was slow, and even connecting to the internet took like 30 seconds or more, which was great when ISDN showed up.
Bandwidth was the main problem.
Instant. Yeah. So I think it's always difficult to extrapolate or to judge the technology from the point that you're currently at versus how fast is it growing. I think for AI, it's hit and miss today. I asked AI ChatGPT to give me for a radio play. I only listened to half the radio play, and I asked ChatGPT, "Can you give me the second half?" And it invented a story about the second half. Had no connection to reality. It just said, it just invented this. And I said, "Oh, that might not be true." Then it invented another thing. And then I said, "Oh, that's still not true. You're inventing stuff." And then it's ChatGPT say, "Yeah, I'm inventing stuff. So I don't know about the things you're asking." And so, but the first two answers were just inventing stuff. So there is you need to know what you're doing, I think. And in a recent discussion about GenAI, someone said, GenAI makes a senior developer more productive and a junior developer less productive because you really need to understand what's coming back. Yeah.
Could you give us some more context, like why that particular combination, like senior to junior?
Well, if you know how to ask, and if you know how to judge the answer, then I think it's often very helpful. And if you know the limit, if you have a feeling about the limitations of the tool, for example, like I use in the IDE, tab completion usually works 100%. So I write a line, and then the IDE says, "Okay, the next 5 lines will be this." And then I said, "Yeah, that looks great," and that tab, and then it writes the next 5 lines. So that's probably usually good. When I do some other stuff, for example, for my newsletter, I use Hugo to generate HTML, and I have no clue about Hugo and no incentive to learn anything about Hugo. So everything I do on the blog is essentially asking ChatGPT, "How can I do this?" And that also works fine. And unit tests also work fine. But then when I try some for my website, I'm started a new website, InkMe, Dream Jobs for CTOs. When I want longer stuff, it has the same confidence level as with the radio play before, but it's just inventing things. And I feel if you're not understanding where the limits are and how to judge results, and like I give up after 2 tries. I try and then I reprompt, and then I have the feeling ChatGPT is not getting there, and then I drop it and write it on my own. But if you might be sucked in, and as a junior, you probably just copy and paste, and then it doesn't compile, and then you rephrase and it copy paste. It doesn't compile, and I think you're not getting out of that because you're probably not getting out of the cycle.
It might be very unintuitive from coding, from like a coder's perspective, which was my comment to you as well. We usually jump to coding immediately rather than ideation, because I use ChatGPT a lot as well, and I know how to trigger it to hallucinate. Like it's very simple to just confuse it when I'm doing a complex task that requires multiple contexts. Right. So, for example, I can have an email, an either conversation, and I can tell it, here's this email conversation, and here's this email conversation, and here's this PDF. And then I ask it questions.
Yeah.
Immediately, it'll just start hallucinating who said what, they said, what's in the PDF was said by person A from the first. It just has no, like something that I would normally assume to have very strict barriers in context. It just mishmashed together, and it just starts hallucinating left, right, and center. I see this all the time. And this is very normal in code because you have strict boundaries in code. And then you're surprised when you get an answer from ChatGPT or Copilot where the boundaries were not honored, but the confidence level is very high. The problem is that it takes a lot of brain power to verify whether the answer honored the original boundaries. Because you're not used to doing that as a developer, because you would normally write it in such a way. And then it sort of requires a level of inspection that you're not used to. You don't have a muscle for, which makes it very slow. It makes it very cognitively challenging to actually focus down on, did it hallucinate? Is there a bug in here? Is this right? Is this naive of me to accept this answer, essentially, and put my name on it?
Yeah.
So the agenda for today, for those of us who are joining in now, is we want to talk about what workflows are GenAI actually useful for, what is definitely a waste of time, number 2, and number 3, a little bit of speculation, a little bit of sci-fi, where we might be headed. Calvin has another suggestion. Calvin says, giving up after 2 retries seems the same as giving up a search if you don't find what you're looking for in the first 2 search result pages.
I disagree. So one point I make for every new hire, especially junior hires, perhaps ChatGPT and GenAI is junior, I don't know, I think an important thing is when to stop doing things. And it might be 2 times too early, 3 or 4 times, but I think I think it's an important skill, and it sounds stupid because I think then I have it, and so I don't want to make it about me, but I think it's an important skill to know when to stop. And that's something also that I think juniors in general lack a lot. Like there are too often 2 types of junior developers. Those that stop immediately and come to you and ask for help. They stop, like they run into a block, and then they come to you and ask for help, and then you help, and then they run to another block. And then you have another type of junior developer who is working for a week, and you go to and say, oh, you worked for a week on that, so can you show me the results? Should be great or something, and they have been blocked for a week. But they tried and they make no progress.
They saw it as a challenge to figure out on their own, and their sense of
And I tell everyone, you need to decide. It's important. You need to decide when to stop. Like after 5 minutes, coming to me is too early. After 5 days is not early enough. It's too late. And somewhere in between is the time when you need to stop.
I see this. I saw this recently on a YouTube video about it was a movie about training Michelin star chefs. There's a lot of movies. I don't even remember the title of the movie, but there was something impactful. Like it was the idea went sort of something along the lines of, you want to be in the room and read people's minds to anticipate need, and they will have a luxurious experience if you correctly anticipate their need. If they had to ask, it was probably too late. And I find that's general trend about, because software is essentially a service industry. We're serving stakeholders, customers. It's more so about communicating about what's being created and sort of passed on the plate, rather than what we're feeding the compiler with. So most of the complex conversations are the human service side, not the compiler side. There are exceptions, of course, but usually it's on the human side where most of the problems happen. And I like this sort of sentiment with the junior example you just made. With if I have to ask, then it's probably too
Yes.
late already, right? If I have to
Yeah.
ask for progress, it's probably
Yes.
you're probably under communicating. If I ask you to stop, if I ask you to deploy, you're probably not releasing fast enough. If I'm asking when it's done, I've probably lost my patience and I don't want it anymore. Right? So it's generally the trend of like we don't actually communicate what we really want. We just want the other side to sort of anticipate our need and sort of adapt.
One of the biggest mistakes managers make.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we both coach technology leaders. What is your primary recommendation for full Gen AI adoption? When would you like coach somebody and say, "Hey, are you using Gen AI for X?" No, maybe maybe you should give it a try. What falls into that category for you with your clients?
So what I tell all my clients is they need to work on AI. Actively. It's not like, oh, we have Copilot or developers do this and marketing does that. I think it can't be accidental. I think AI usage in a company, and I'm just talking just to make it clear, my clients are between 5 and 80 engineers, so that's the range I'm talking about. I have no clue about large organizations.
Yeah, same here.
Basically,
I limit myself to teams that are lean or sort of too pizza-sized deliberately.
So some of the things, oh, that's stupid, what Stefan says, might be that is stupid, but also it might be the context. And so it can't be accidental AI usage. I think it needs to be strategic AI usage. And that means for me 2 things. Most companies have no clue about how AI fits into their product strategy or into their product and something. It's not like, oh, let's add ChatGPT somehow, ChatGPT AI. But I think that's not enough. You need
even on that front, like, are we, when we're talking AI usage, like, are we talking product integration or like workflow integration, like process wise? Where do you?
No, I feel like I think for process-wise, like you can concentrate on a lot of things, and most of my clients don't have enough time. I feel process-wise is going more or less fine. What I would do process-wise is set up some boundaries about legality, about like some boundaries for people to stay in. But I feel like engineers are great at playing with new toys and doing the stuff. I might nudge people. I might nudge engineers that don't use AI in the IDE to use AI somehow. But in general, I think the biggest what they lack is how they can integrate AI in their product. And so these are 2 things. And the first step for that would be to play around with AI on a deeper level. Like if you read on Hacker News, lately there was an article on Hacker News about someone using AI to OCR a list of dates and then creating from the list of dates that were in the picture, creating calendar entries and then putting them in a calendar. That's I feel like that's 1 step further than normal ChatGPT usage. And I feel like that's and beyond is something you need to play as a CTO. That's the engineering level that you should, the innovation level, you need to be there and beyond that to see how you could use it for your product. I have a client about they do some scraping. And I think that they need to be, we had a lot of discussions, they need to be the very best in AI scraping content and detecting that stuff, and then you need to learn how to from a technology, what's currently possible, what will be possible probably next year, and see how you can adapt that into your product and then work with product. So you're the technology driver and you work with product and how that works with product and then how that works business-wise for the CEO. I think this is where you need to be as a CTO now. Not talking about Copilot usage, but about how can you innovate? What's the forefront of AI, Gen AI, and usage and how that does this structure your product? And then if you have done that, you need to come back, because there will probably be a lot of changes in your department. How do you do ML ops? How do you do? Do you need engineers? Do you have an engineer and an AI prompter in the team, or what's your setup in the future? What do you need your own model? Do you
because you need to
model,
debug them at some point. Like there will be an issue, you need to
Yeah.
improve on them or stop them from prompting a certain negative case, or
and that's the
legal
discussion I
case.
think people need to have. It's not. That's a big lever. I feel like the big impact that CTOs can have. Whereas should my engineers use Copilot or not, I feel comparably is more trivial, at least to me.
But that means that for you, the Copilot usage is benign. Like there's no significant difference, and that's the reason for your sort of.
I think.
Prioritization?
I think people will learn, engineers will learn what works and what doesn't work this year, and what works and what doesn't work next year. As I said, I would talk to legal about AI usage, but beyond that, and then have some guidelines, as I said in the beginning. But otherwise, I talked to someone in this AI discussion. Someone said, well, they have the challenge. They are a military contractor, and they have the challenge to not use AI. They can't use AI. They need they need to train their own models, and because they just can't use ChatGPT.
But they can use open source models, right? You just can't.
Yes, but you need to.
They just can't allow inference to leave the room.
Yeah. So that would be some challenge. Or what's the challenge for health providers? Or what's the that is something I would clear up with legal. But otherwise, we're not yet there. I think the next step is something that in my no, not we're not talking about the future, far future.
Okay,
not yet.
What about the other end of the spectrum? So, what is it? What have you tried and it's popular, and you're of the opinion that it's definitely a waste of time to either consider AI to put into some kind of product or into some kind of process workflow? Like what's definitely silly?
What's silly?
Yeah.
I feel what's silly. Some stuff that doesn't work for me, like two things that doesn't work for me with AI yet. Some clients of mine do this, is let AI generate slide decks for example, because it looks like the slide decks look good.
They look convincing. They look convincing until someone reads them.
But if you look at them in more, if you read, that makes sense. That's a good point. But then I always have the feeling, if I do this, it feels too generic. It feels not to the point. It feels like, for example, when I was, something about me, again, sorry. But when I was doing exams at university, I wasn't very good in written exams, so that was lala. So, okay. But in my I don't know what's in English, but in the exam where I could talk, I had the best grade possible, always, because I just started to talk, and then even if I don't know it exactly, I just talk, and then that sounds convincing, like I know what I'm talking about. I know usually what I'm talking about, but I could have some hangers, and then I just talk them through, and that's how something like ChatGPT sometimes sounds. If you like, what would be my market entry strategy for this product into Germany? And then it will create 5 slides, and it has 5 bullet points or 10 bullet points. And overall, it sounds good. But it sounds also a little bit like McKinsey stuff. It sounds like good, but it's in the end,
heartless.
It's not
cold.
It's not convincing, And that's also something that the second point, which is silly, to me, it's so very subjective, but silly to me is when I published my book, I tried to experiment with ChatGPT in the book.
Same.
And I also tried to do this with articles, you know, and I was very, very unhappy. And I also, and same thing, LeanPub offers something to translate your book into other languages automatically with ChatAI. So they have a tuned model to translate books in different languages. But I assume in that case, and in the first case where I tried it, it's not my voice. It's not me. It's very generic. The texts that are generated for a book, like, oh, I have this passage, I don't want to write it, or I don't know what to write, and then let it generate. It felt not like my voice, and it felt very generic. So I stopped experimenting. I didn't put anything in. But I also stopped experimenting because it felt like it didn't feel good. And I'm not sure if this becomes better in the future or it will stay that way and we just adapt to that level and say, okay, that's the level of information. That's how information looks like. Because there was an interesting article again on Hacker News, which is also in my newsletter. I put in my newsletter is a study where they let laymen write laws. And they wrote laws incomprehensible just as real laws because they thought that's the way laws sound. So I feel like if GenAI is generating all this stuff in 10 years, we just think that everything needs to sound that way because we just read it that way. So sorry, very philosophical, but this is silly. So content,
but I like it. Yeah,
content is something I don't.
I have similar experiences as well. You know, LinkedIn posts terrible, newsletter posts terrible, blog posts terrible, writing even non-technical documentation terrible, designing stuff code terrible. It's great at giving me some it's great when I do want generic stuff. When I ask it for a generic, you know, I'm prototyping something, give me a generic, you know, workflow UI for this.
Yeah.
And it's very good at giving me the generic thing quickly.
Yeah.
Same thing with I'm using it for, I'm not using it for articles. It's silly. I write a lot, and it's like the amount of GenAI I use is very limited. You know, sometimes maybe just to analyze what I wrote. Hey, I wrote this. Could you summarize it for me, so that I know that, you know, is what I wrote getting across what I wanted to say? You know, and then I ask it to summarize it back to me so that I check. You know, did I nail it? Right. So it is more. I'm using it more for inspection rather than generation.
Yeah.
Where I am using it for generation is to get past this sort of blank canvas feeling, where I say, hey, I'm writing an article. It'll be structured sort of like this. Can you give me like an outline and I'll fill out the blanks? And I really like doing that because I just dump it in. And I tell it, you know, give me markdown, and then at the end, I want a picture. It generate me a template for what I'm about to do. And I don't have a template for that because I just made this up. Like I would usually only create templates for workflows that are repeated, and I have a stable process for it. But with AI, I find that I can sort of pretend I have that for a one-off thing, right? So I can say I'm generating a lead magnet. Can you just generate something for me? So I will iterate on it. Just generate structure for me so that I'm not staring at a blank page.
Yeah.
And it'll give me like pages, and you know, it will get the dimensions right. It will get the positioning of the title right. But then I said, you know, just give me placeholders, and then it gives me placeholders. So I find it's really great for that stuff where I know that it's good at generic stuff, and the generic stuff sounds generic. So I ask it to build the thing I know it's good for. At least for, I know it has no chance of hallucinating. I know it will find it very easy to follow my instruction, and I will sort of mesh it anyway. So I write a lot. I also ghostwrite for another publication. What I like to do is I like it to, when I have my research material, I ask it to create summaries of all of my research material to see if it matches my notes, see if it picks up any details that are relevant. like what language it uses or how it sort of binds certain ideas together that I might not have thought of, and then I just, I put the structure in place. Oh, I didn't know that those three. I didn't know that paragraph could be summarized in like 3 bullet points. I like that. Okay, but I will use my own words. Right.
Yeah.
So I then use it for idea generation, and I find that it just improves my workflow as long as it produces the answers quickly. Otherwise, if I'm using it primarily to hack this idea of I have content, I've already read it, but now that I'm writing something, I might need to actually read it again in detail, and I'm using it to sort of short circuit that. So when I'm already know what the document is about, I can then ask it, hey, on page 7, there's this section about X, Y, and Z. Can you give me the highlights? Because then it'll remind me of what it actually was. So I find it for that part of ideation is very good. I would need your help on getting it into IDE usage. I don't use. I find Copilots very distracting in the IDE. Very distracting. I don't know why. I don't know if it's my glasses, if it's the flickering of the shadow suggestions. Yeah, I have not found. I do like explanation where I can share context with it. I can say, here, can you explain this code block to me? And I found that when I was working in finance, that I could ask it to suggest variables that match the domain.
Okay. Yeah.
So I can so it knows that so that money is not money, so that maybe it's a debit, or maybe it has a certain structure, or what does clearance mean in this case? Maybe there's some nuance there, like what adjective could I use? I like using it for that, like getting more like linguistic power into the code itself. But I'm using it for writing. I'm not using it for coding.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm using it for picking better function names and variable names. That might be my bias, but it's it's very good at giving generic answers for generically solved generic problems. So it's very good at coming up with an algorithm for binary search because it has seen 4,000 million hundreds of binary search implementations in all possible languages. So for that, it's very good because the answers are correct because they were human curated. So it just knows how to list them. Other than that, it is silly for like heavy thinking writing, especially when style is important, when voice with the color of voice is important. And I had no success about generating meaningful images or thumbnails for my articles. Like it just no.
I use ChatGPT to generate images for my articles.
But they do look AI generated. Like, I mean, that's a stylistic choice then.
Yeah, they do, but not that bad. Like for that article, like I think it's okay. I can live with that.
There was the hand with the keyboard and the
That's AI generated, and but it could also be from a.
But the bar is low, right? Because if you don't use that, you will use Unsplash, and then you run into the.
I used Repick.
Or Repick, and then you run into the trouble of just picking something that's very popular that somebody else has used for another blog post, and then if somebody sees the other blog, I once picked an Unsplash image for every article I wrote, and then I started seeing the images on other blogs, and it's wait, that's my article about actually, it's just me being creating attachment to the image based on the content I wrote for it, but then I see it in some other context, and it just gives me this full like suspension of disbelief. Like it breaks the fourth wall for me, and it just gives me this like weird sense of, oh, actually the image was really bad. Like I should have picked something else. Then I did it on a whole series where I generated images, but on series articles that are very similar to each other, I find it very difficult to create nuance. Like I find it very difficult to get a different image than what I used in the previous article. So I'm still learning on that, but I know that is a problem that can easily be nuanced.
My point is, but to move a step forward, the point in my article was looking into the future, and I feel like all of these Copilot, GenAI, image generation stuff, that's just a bridge. So this is just like HTML in 1995.
It's prototyping.
You know,
like it's being prototyped. We're all using the prototype version of.
This will all go away. Like,
yeah.
you know, when I was in 1995, or 1993, I don't know, something around that, when I created my first homepage, I asked the person who brought the internet to the university when this was, but I forgot what he said. I think I don't know, 1993 something. 1994. I created my first homepage with HTML, and then I did a lot of manual HTML. Like my first paid job was putting a magazine. So there was a large pharmaceutical company in Germany. They wanted to create a magazine on the internet, and they gave me a Word file, and then I translated that manually to HTML. That was my first job that I got paid for. And
ironically, many of us started that way.
Yeah,
many of us were translating magazines into web pages in HTML.
Because I was a CMS, you know, and so CMS was not yet invented. The idea of CMS was not yet invented. And so then later there was a CMS, and so this manual HTML for most of the people went away. And I feel like that's the same here. Currently, we do a lot of manual stuff, but all of that will go away, because I think software engineering, like software in general, will go away. So I think all applications will go away. There will be no more applications. And in the time frame, I thought in the article I wrote something about 10 years or something. But again, Hacker News, I love-hate relationship with the website. But in Hacker News, there was an article linked about, I think, how an AI generated Doom recently. So the AI was playing Doom, and then first-person shooters, or was shown first-person shooters, and then it generated something that I could play as a player in Doom without there being a Doom engine or any WAT files or anything. And that's how I imagine this phase. So there will be, like, there's no CRM and no CMS and no block software and no SaaS software. You know, it does not exist. Software does not exist. It's just exists as a model.
That's what I was commenting on as well on your post. And Callahan has a similar comment. He says, considering how Gen AI is trained, I think it is expected to be good at generic stuff and to struggle with specifics. Perhaps one of the inhibitors for further adoption will be how the models are pre-trained. So this idea of pre-training is also sort of, it's interesting to me. I do have some machine learning training, but I've never really put it much into practice, not outside of like leadership scope. But I did do machine learning with Andrew Ning prior to Coursera. So I had I like to think I trained on machine learning with the best, and it really inspired me to sort of think outside of the box as an engineer, because MLOps is a whole different beast, especially back then. Before we had Jupyter, before we had all the specifically the Google and the Meta, the sort of open sourced tools to help with that. How they're trained. So on the Doom example regarding pre-training, it's interesting that it comes with a realistic game that follows the rules, and we know Doom has gravity, but the AI doesn't know it has gravity. It just creates something that to us seems intuitively meaningful, without understanding the underlying rules, without needing the rules to be coded. And I think,
but I also don't know there is gravity, you know. So I feel like I think I personally think there is too much. People make it. Perhaps I studied philosophy and philosophy of mind and stuff like that. It was not so super helpful, but I mean, it just means I'm interested in these topics. It doesn't mean I know anything, but it just shows I'm interested in topics. And I think, like, if I let loose of this glass, it falls down. But I will not think it will fall down because of gravity. There is no logical reason. It's not like I open this, there's no friction anymore. There is gravity, this will fall down. No, it's just like it will fall down without any notion of gravity or something, And so the point could be made. I don't model my world with gravity in it. I just know things are not moving.
But the AI would have to be pre-trained with dropped
yes,
glasses.
but me too.
Yeah.
Like it's like a kid. You give a kid a glass to a kid. A kid bonk after 10 times. Kid understands if they let loose of the glass, it falls down, and without any understanding of gravity or of Newton or Einstein or general relativity. It's so I'm not sure that there is a difference between how we work and how an AI works. We both might not have an understanding of gravity.
But with the Doom example itself, Doom is also one of the first-person shooters. So as far as Kaloyan mentioned, and you and I also talked about this idea of it's good at generic things. Doom is also what you and I would consider the most generic shooter. It's the father of all shooters, so it's the most generic shooter. So maybe it's just good at generic shooters. But
I don't think so.
But like how far can you extrapolate it? Like it can write a generic article very well, but it doesn't extrapolate well. Now, okay, fair.
But fair. I don't know. In 10 years, there is. I feel like, and this Doom example just I think accelerated my opinion. It might not be 10 years in the future, but there might not. There's no software. There's no CRM software. I just say to an AI, this is the data. I have a data lake. This is the data, and then what's my best customers? Who should I send something? And then or get more money out of these customers, and then the AI generates emails to sell some stuff or some. There's no CRM. There's no HubSpot software. There's no CMS. There's no web. There's no,
because we structure it for human consumption, and human consumption is bandwidth limited, right? So
there's no WordPress. There will be no WordPress. There's just some data, and then the AI generates the HTML on the fly from the data, because the output medium is HTML, and if the output medium is VR, it generates a VR output. It's so this is how I envision this, and then there is no coding involved in that because there are no applications. So
I also like that. I think using it for coding, specifically for generating code that then an engineer inspects, is a waste of time, because it's just serving the human operator, and you will still move at the speed of the human operator. Like, it's very difficult to just because the code is just the means to an end, and it's a liability. Like, especially if you generate it very quickly, you'll just create a liability very quickly. Like, to me, Gen AI, where I would like to see it go in the next 10 years, is just let's just skip the whole coding part. Just give me a meaningful prototype generated to a high degree of complexity. Right. So it is that I would like the engineers to not be involved. I don't necessarily want the engineers to use AI to just, I still have to have the same department. I would like transformation into the department, at least maybe in some phase of the project, that maybe that would be enough in the near future. In the far future, maybe being fully replaced. But everybody's talking about this full replacement. I don't think that's going to happen. I think it'll just make the simple problems go away and make it more complex.
I very strongly believe in a Star Trek model. Like
in a Star Trek model,
in 50 years, earlier than 50 years, but latest in 50 years, but earlier. There will be not even like for now we use Gen AI to generate code. Then there will be Gen AI that generates apps. But then again, next step is there are no apps. So first step is there is no code.
You generate the experience
and
itself.
Second, there is no, because if you watch Star Trek, there is no finance app. There is no replicator app. I'm not a huge Star Trek fan. Most Star Wars fan. I'm not a huge Star Trek fan. But there is no replicator app. It's just that go to the replicator and you say, and that's not code. I know it's something physical, but you say I want this and this and this. There is no clicking around and no menus and where I can select stuff. I just say, I want a chai latte, and then you get a chai latte.
Yeah, the experience is being generated as,
And that's the same for email, or for everything, so next step is HubSpot generated HubSpot apps that are not written by coders, but the next step is there is no HubSpot anymore. It's just like something runs communication to some people to get them convinced they are selling something and they want to buy something.
They buy something. Calvin has another great point. He says that Dennis has this very good observation a few months ago that GenAI are like the ROM AIs in Neuromancer. Have you read the book Neuromancer?
Yeah, I have, but forgotten. Read it several times.
Trained and do not evolve further.
I'm so old. I have it when it came out. So
So the idea in Neuromancer was that you had Neuromancer and Wintermute.
Yeah.
One was basically this perfectly pre-trained model that couldn't have impact on the outside world, but it was hyper intelligent. The other one was essentially a digital empath. Like it could emulate human behavior, and it could, mimic. It could manipulate people by creating imagery for them in dreamlike states, where it will have this sort of perfect understanding. Like it's like the perfect sociopath.
Yeah,
it understands human behavior and human nature enough to be able to manipulate you, but it's not very intelligent. Like it doesn't have a lot of bandwidth about the actual world.
Yeah,
it was then this clash between the two AIs about, hey, we can create a super. A super entity if we merge two AIs together, and then one of them had this existential crisis of, well, I cease to exist if we merge, and are we conscious? Are we not conscious? Like, should this duality be persisted? Like, there are guardrails in place for a reason. Is it meaningful to just, if we can generate all experience, what's the point of us existing, right? That was then the philosophical aspect of Neuromancer. I don't want to spoil the book, so that's as far as I'm gonna say about the book. But it's interesting in the sense of, so where I see this mentioned a lot, this which you mentioned, there's no more apps, is with movies. So there's not going to be movies anymore that have titles and actors.
Yes.
But I will just open up, let's say, Netflix, and I will.
No.
And it'll know what I like to watch, and it'll just generate something for me. So like there will be this,
but there's no Netflix.
single experience generated movie.
Yeah.
It took a lot of power to generate, but it didn't demand the human labor and the years of development necessary to record a movie. It just gives me an experience. So I think if that can be automated, that would be a huge step up. Like that equivalent in software, that equivalent in pharmaceuticals, that equivalent in entertainment. How far we are from that, I don't know. Like I find it very difficult to have intuition for like how we're doing. Like, is it getting better, or is it just getting better at faking? Like, is it just getting better at the use cases that I'm interested in?
I don't know. There is this talking about a far future. There is this one of my most favorite Wikipedia articles, which is called I think it's called The Far Future or something.
Mm-hmm.
It talks about billions and billions and billions of years in the future, like when like it talks about a very, very far future. I think it's an interesting, like when all atoms decayed, and like it has a lot of events in the future, like 100 events in the far future. That's interesting. Not that far in the future, but the kind of far future for AI, I think the most interesting to me. I'm not so well read, but there is this I mentioned in the article. There is this sci-fi universe from Banks, which is called the Culture Universe, and essentially that's the society where AI runs everything. It's people do whatever they like, but the show is run by AI. So the show they keep their AI essentially keep the society afloat and do all this stuff that needs to be done. And I feel like that might be a far future that we steer into. And
what is it that makes that book, that novel, that idea interesting to you?
Yeah, kind of. I think the book is interesting. It's a series of books. I think that the books are interesting, real written. Sometimes they're a little bit too brutal for my taste, but I think they are good, well written books. And the AI aspect is an interesting aspect. Like there are spaceships. One interesting aspect of spaceships, they give themselves names because they are essentially every spaceship is an AI, and they give names to themselves, and might be like coming back to before the name of the spaceship might be surprising gravity or something. That might be the name an AI gave itself. But I feel like that. And there's also interesting one book from Banks, which is where AIs are prohibited, and there are organizations that hunt AIs because AIs are prohibited. So that's also called the algebra.
Yeah, the Dune series have a similar arc because they have a sort of thinking machines ban, like everything more complex than a calculator is banned.
Yeah, but Banks, I think, is a little bit, Go read the book if you're interested in the topic. The algebra I think, is an excellent book. Again, a little bit brutal, partially, but this is where we might go, around AIs. But that's the far future, not the 50-year future. I don't think.
What about the interfaces? Like, do you want to see, like, we see multimodal AI sort of becoming, I think the next trend seems to be multimodal interfaces. Speech to video, video to text, text to speech. You see any next steps from here regarding, will engineers stop using the keyboard perhaps? Like will we ever build applications through, code something that looks like this experience? Like, is that maybe
Yeah, as a bridge technology, yes. A stepstone, I would see something like that as a stepstone, yes.
What do you mean as a bridge technology? Could you?
Yeah, well, as I said, there will be no apps. So there is this app, Sana Coder. So then that goes away. The way how people,
But what is then? What level of human agency does?
No.
What would you even like an operator of that? Like, what is it? An experience, like a bundle of experiences, or would the model itself just control a certain class of experiences? Like, would you have a model for entertainment and a model for productivity and a model for driving cars? Like, is that how, or transportation itself?
About cars, I'm not so sure if we currently go this local AI route with cars. I'm not so sure because this is not something that
it's assistance, but not full automation.
That all sci-fi people think the way. I think most people think about a centralized car system. So I feel that might also be a case of a centralized car system in the future, where we have individual AIs, local AIs in cars, but that might go away, I think.
I mean, we do it. We've been doing it since forever with trains. Like, no train is operated locally because it's too dangerous. Right? Because you need. The biggest problem with trains is that you need more information than is available to you.
Yeah.
Because you need to know your current speed, your stopping distance, and your stopping distance is the length along which you can possibly stop safely is outside of your field of vision.
Yeah.
So that constraint has immediately centralized most train operation.
I feel like local AI is determined by local AI is determined by the speed of light, probably. Like if I'm away and the latency between a central AI and my local and me is too large because of the speed of light, then I might need a local AI. I think that's more like how this is driven. I mean, ChatGPT is no local AI, So, but then we get all these AI chips, and Intel launched the Lunar Lake, and they touted AI 10 times, I think, in the first paragraphs of the press release. So we get local AI, but again, I think local AI is just some.
But they're all hybrids, right? They're just dealing with like some RAG model or some centralized body of the model, plus we're also running locally.
Yeah. Yes.
Right. So it is hybrid.
But again, I think what's also not for me for a long time, and still is not discussed enough, is like the AI, the training and the inferencing, like running a model and training a model, which are two different things. And for training a model, you need more data and much more power, whereas executing a model is rather simple. If you have some stuff in your CPU, it gets much faster. Like if you have to run a modern NPU, that's faster
the
than
use case is also different.
My graphics card, for example.
So inference, if you have endless amount of CPU, you want to burn CPU at inference to produce the answer faster.
Yes.
But at training stage, you want to basically CPU block yourself. You want to train as much as possible, right? So you're not looking at, I want to train X and then I want an answer. No, I just want to burn the entire capacity that I have to train as much as possible because I have so much training data. Or at least if I can exhaust my training data, well, then I'll increase the number of variables. So on the training side, it's at least at our current level of hardware, you almost always want to exhaust capacity.
Yeah, but a lot of people well, my point was not very clear, but my point was more that people confuse these two things quite often. Like well, with CPUs, like they say this is great, this is great for AI when they mean this is great for running a model. It's not that great for.
Oh, I see. It's not great for training. It's great for inference, but not great for. I see.
You need much more power for training, I feel like. And then but yeah. But how is training in the future? Do we have these two modes in the future, training and running a model, or is it one thing in the future?
It's actually a very good point, Stefan. Because one of the most confusing things because people ask me about AI as well. One of the most confusing things is that just users seems to have this, like, to anybody outside of the field of machine learning,
yes,
it is not clear that the AI does not train from inference.
Yeah.
Right. So to a normal user, it would be plausible to assume that
because we
do. Yes, we do. That the AI would learn as you prompt it. So prompting is inference, right? So I have a prompt and it will infer what will follow the prompt. That's why we call it inference. And training is what is prior to it, what creates the model. Training is what creates the model, essentially.
Yeah.
And then the model is static, and then you run inference on it. And then there's multiple levels of like multiple level learning, and then some ways of like periodically putting the inference back into the model, or creating like some kind of local memory of all, keeping the inference questions and answers in context so that it'll give you this illusion that I'm sort of reprompting you with what conversation we had up until this point, and that basically becomes a trade-off of like token size and capacity for like what you would consider short-term memory for Gen AI, but they don't really have memory. They just have like very good
faking it.
Yeah. So that's interesting. So you're saying that at some point in the future, inference and training would happen at the same time.
Yes.
So that it could learn from inference.
Yes.
But is that even algorithmically possible? Like the way we have defined machine learning algorithms, we do need to classify correct. We train it to be correct on something, and then we human label at least some data set, and then as it starts inferring, we correct it. So there's always an element of training involved, even if it's like self-learning.
But again, that's a kind of the question. I mean, it's very difficult talking about the future, but I think this is a kind of question. If I have a 56K modem, can I watch HD? There was no HD back then, but can I watch DVD? But can I watch film over 56? No, I can't. So well, is it the current state of things, or is it like it's sometimes difficult to I think extrapolate limitations, because are the limitations in general, or are they just
now? I mean, now the constraints that I see changing the most is the energy efficiency. So solar panels are like this huge thing where solar panel costs are crashing down, and we could potentially power much larger models and solve the energy problem, at least the I don't know, burst capacity, at least to train a model very fast. I mean, that's what I see happening just by observing the news. And I don't like that my computers and phone heat up at inference level at asking complex questions. So if that can be solved in some way, that could be in like immediate future, like short-term future win. But I find it very difficult to speculate. Like I admire your philosophical mind, but sort of being able to sort of combine it with a little bit of sci-fi, combine it with a little bit of constraint theory, and sort of see where we can go. I find it very difficult, to imagine this idea of there's no apps and there's just experience. There's just flow of I have a workflow. The AI will generate a one-time use workflow for me that works for my use case. It sounds amazing, but my expectations are trained at having structured workflows for basically everything that we use automation for, everything that we use digital products for, have some structured nature to them. And I think the Gen AIs are sort of breaching into that space of no, we don't need structure. We're smart enough to just compute and to infer. I find it very difficult to be in that realm of intuition.
Yes. But one minor point that I am also made in the article, because I wanted to make some points to make it more real, and not too fluffy. I feel like because I managed as a CTO, I managed data warehouses. I didn't, because I have no clue. But a little bit of clue about Postgres. But the team managed it at great data warehouse and data teams wherever I worked. And there are people like, okay, there's like, how do we structure this? How do we structure the domain? How do we structure reports? And there are I've done a lot of this kind of stuff. And I feel like this is one of the first things that will go away. We will not have a structured data warehouse anymore. That's a thing that's probably going away in the next 5 years. As soon as a startup comes up with a convincing product, and
I like that metaphor. I like that metaphor.
Lake, and then it's I
like that metaphor because if I take that metaphor to the extreme, then ChatGPT is the modern library. Right, so libraries are optimized with the human constraint in mind, which means that no human can take action on any body of knowledge that takes more than 60 years to acquire. So the bodies of knowledge have to be simplified and expanded and sort of made logistically more feasible. Because I can't consume more than a lifetime of knowledge.
Yes.
If you need more knowledge than that to take a certain decision, then you need to come up with inefficient social structures of who holds which knowledge and how do we interface, how do we have conversations, right? And then you create a company essentially, which is why we're, as a civilization, we're successful, is that we manage to sort of separate out specialized knowledge and create groups and teams and organizations and entire companies. Companies are now bigger than certain nations. Entire companies that you have this heterogeneous body of knowledge. There's like a quite big overlap of like generic knowledge and culture and communication styles, but then together as a company we can hold more collective knowledge than the individual mind. And Gen AIs are this just super library of I can hold as much knowledge, but my phone does now. My phone basically has access to everything, and it can reasonably reason with me at my level. And I can ask it to combine, hey, read everything there is about English literature, and then give me some insights about X, Y, and Z. Right? So it's catering to it's catering still to the limits of the human operator, but not in the intermediate steps.
Yes.
Whereas data warehouses are that exactly. It knows that it requires human operators at every step. And every step is structured because of that, right? So I think ChatGPT is a great example of that. It's basically a library where it's not indexed by alphabet. because at inference level it doesn't need to look up the books anymore, right? So it doesn't need. It can be a great search engine because it doesn't need an SEO index.
Yes.
Because it can just know everything, right? So it doesn't need the Pareto distribution of, well, the human operator will want to see the first search result first because its attention is limited and its sort of viewport is limited, and we want to advertise to them, so their focus is also limited. So if I take that metaphor to the extreme, what I can imagine is data warehouses no longer need to be structured because the intermediate steps don't require a human operator. It's possible that that software design might not need to be structured anymore, that requirements don't need to be structured anymore, because the intermediate steps might skip the human operator. So I think that's, so everything that you're sort of envisioning for the next 10, 50 years is coming from that idea of we will remove human operators from like the intermediate steps, which will alleviate the need for structure, which means that the AI will just outsmart us.
I didn't see it that way, but yes, I agree. I think that's a good point.
Is there now that we have this metaphor in mind, is there like an immediate obvious application for this kind of use case for you that stands out? Nutrition, perhaps? Medical history? It doesn't seem to be very...
I think the interesting thing is medical is. I think medical is an interesting topic in this way, because if we from the model you created now with this, I think it's interesting what you said. The structure, because the structure is there because of the operators. It's the in-between operators.
Yeah. So I have a physician. I have a family physician who has generic information, and I'm constantly sort of structuring.
No, my health state. No,
I give you some idea now.
My point would be that no, we just had our dog had some problems, health problems. She had health problems, and we needed to put her into an operation, and she got an operation, and very, very draining times. And I feel like if I take this, and we didn't know what was going on with her, and I feel like because no doctor knew exactly what was going on with her, and I feel like people did not know what's going on with her because each doctor created some kind of abstraction into the whole state of our dog, and make inferences based on that structured information, because
it was simplified.
It was simplified, and it was structured.
The structure required simplification.
The structure is always like when I was doing a startup in 1999, 1998, we did a knowledge management startup which tried to structure information in people's heads. And about ontologies and stuff like that, and we talked to a large.
So the ontologies, as you translate to a more structured version, it reduces the entropy of.
And a large telecom provider asked us if we could help them with our product, because they had different departments, and every department had a different view on the world. So like the support department had a different world, like the engineering and the sales and marketing, and they couldn't talk to each other because they had hundreds of products, but they didn't match because everyone had a different view on the products. And we said, no, we can't help you there because it's a problem you have. It's not something that software can solve in an easy way. And I feel like that's the same here, that the abstraction already creates, like the ontology already creates a worldview that limits what you can see. And the abstraction is only there because the doctor needs an abstraction because he can't deal with all the data. But an AI does not need that abstraction and the simplification.
But it's also how the doctor is trained. The doctor is trained to try the most obvious things first, right? So Like at least family
I
health.
don't know how doctors are trained. I worked with a lot of medical students when I was studying, because I was the only computer science person in everyone was medicine, and they just learned a lot of stuff without understanding what they were learning. I felt.
I mean,
but
there's a lot of
yes.
statistics involved, right? So they're being taught how to think regarding, the most likely case right now in this.
I think I'm also trained on pattern matching,
and pattern matching, yeah, but pattern matching with statistics, right? So they say,
I don't know. I don't know. Like every time they need it, there are probably very, very good people out there. There's always very good people.
Because every time I talk to my doctor, and again, I might be extrapolating too much from my own personal experience. I'm biased, but being aware of the bias, a lot of the conversations that I have with my doctor my physician is, I say I have X, Y, and Z, and usually her answer is, oh, A, B, and C are very common right now. Have you checked for?
Yeah. Okay.
Right. So there is that some level of locality that they base out of like what's going on statistically around them, and they try to diagnose him based on that. But the problem is, if I have a prior condition, or if I did a little bit more research about what I'm going through, they might dismiss that due to bias about what they're being told to pattern match against regarding frequency of occurrence, and that's very difficult. That creates sort of that siloed mentality of, well, I'm not trained to sort of holistically take what I say for granted.
Yes.
So I think that might be an obvious application if the models could take what I say for granted. If what I say wouldn't have to be verified by a physician, because then I feel like we're not making much progress. It's the same with the AI models for coding. If a business owner could talk to an GenAI model to generate an application without the involvement of an engineer, that would be a huge step forward. But if the code that is being generated has to be vetted by an engineer, then we didn't make much progress. Because the human operator is still structured. It's still, it still follows the same silos.
But with ChatGPT, we're 3 years in or something, so
fair.
It's not like
super exciting.
Like internet in 1995, so or internet is older, but World Wide Web in 1995.
Yeah.
When I say internet, I mean World Wide Web.
The internet as we know it, the popular bits.
Yeah.
So,
but in medical, I think, just to wrap that up, in medical, I think that your idea of the abstractions, the abstractions for intermediate operators, I feel could have huge impact on health, because people die because of that. A restriction.
It might be difficult due to regulation, because the regulations might enforce the abstractions to still be there. So
we'll see.
That might. We'll see. Well, I would like to wrap up here. So if you have any last questions from the audience, now is a good time. Just gonna give them a few minutes to chime in. This is a really cool conversation, and a little bit last minute. So we organized this today in the morning. Inspired by your post and my reaction to your post.
I enjoyed it a lot.
Me too. This is a very, very, very cool conversation. I got a lot of new ideas, and I got a lot more articulation about how I'm thinking about Gen AI. I'm glad we made that sort of run through on like what works, what's definitely silly. In some way, I feel relieved that my experience matches your experience to some degree, so that I don't have to sort of buy into that social media FOMO that's going around regarding AI. Brilliant.
And I will take your intermediate operator model with me. So that's something I think that's worth. Awesome. That's great.
Stefan, I see no new questions coming in. I'm sure there will be a question the moment I hit the red button, so we'll just figure it out on LinkedIn. To our live audience, and Kalyan for chatting very actively. Thank you for being with us. This is recorded on YouTube, and there will be a follow recording there. And if any follow-up questions, you can follow Stefan on LinkedIn. He's the awesome CTO, and you will find me on
Amazing.
The amazing CTO. I'm sorry.
I
made this.
I'm awesome too.
But he's awesome, amazing CTO. You have a book called The Amazing CTO.
Yes.
What's the book about? If you just pitch it in 30 seconds.
Oh, The book is about, it has 140 rules about how to be amazing as a CTO. Easy, snackable, 1 rule a page, something like that.
Nice. That's great intermediate structure. Okay, Stefan, thank you so much for being with me, with us. And hope you'll join us at some point in the future again.
Yeah, sure.
I'll be sending up our live audience with a little bit of rock music. And we'll see you next time. Ciao.
Ciao.